Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds. Once in a while, I wish it would come out somewhere weird, like your eye, like the corner of your eye.
Yeah, like it bubbles.
You just rip like a huge fart out of the corner of your eye.
Nothing more than the problem with farting out your eye is that it implies that other things could come out of there.
Right. It also might, like, if it was like a gusty enough fart, it might just blast your eyeball right out, like Dennis Hopper in Waterworld.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. It would be bad design. I like the idea. You get pink eye all the time.
Oh yeah, but it would be a surprise. You would never know when it was going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Hi everybody.
Hello everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched The Hobbit, There and Back Again, a 2024 fan edit, Part 1, Hobbits.
Far to the east, over ranges and rivers, lies a single solitary peak. The dwarves are determined to reclaim their homeland.
I added that last.
So many hobbits. Actually, there's only one hobbit in this.
That's why it's called The Hobbit.
Yeah. Singular.
It's just the one. Yeah. Before we get started, that was a lot.
They should have called this Too Many Dwarves.
Too Many Dwarves, yeah. All right. This is a fan edit by our Patreon producer. Shout out to Max Logan Boyer. They did this 4-hour. They took, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
They took all of the Hobbit films.
The entire Hobbit trilogy.
And they condensed them to a 4-hour cut. And we are going to do part 1 and part 2. Because I would argue a 4-hour cut, it's like, yeah, it's the 2 movies they should have done, all right?
Yeah, it's what they were initially planning to do as well.
Yeah.
Was 2 films.
So we watched it. We watched the first 2 hours of this.
This fan edit, this labor of love.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
Yeah, thank you.
If people are interested...
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
They can reach out to him on the Reddit. There's a U, and then it's like a line, but it's forward. Like it's tilting forward, like a slash.
Like a cool
forward.
Leaning line, like it's leaning on
yeah.
the hood of a car to tell you something, like Matthew Broderick in a teen movie from the 80s. Like he's about to tell you some tip about life, living life to the fullest.
And it's then B Max Logan, Logan, and then the rest is self-explanatory. Or just, I think you could probably go on Reddit and Google and search There and Back Again fan edit. It's in the fan edit subreddit. So that's how you would watch this. You have to go bother Max.
There's
Logan
a whole fan
Boyer.
edit subreddit.
Thank you.
I should take a peek in there.
There's fucking subreddits for everything. It's fucked up.
No, it's totally fucked. I wanted to say a couple of things up top before we got started on this. This is the first fan edit I've watched. I've never watched the famous Topher Grace edit of the prequel trilogy Star Wars movies.
Oh,
I've never seen that.
I watched that, and the funniest thing about that is it cuts out the entirety of episode 1 except for the ending. It starts with the Qui-Gon Jinn death, spoilers. And it's one of those where you look at it and you're like, yeah, you're right. You didn't need any of that movie, did you?
Not really.
Like it
was weird that we started with him as a child, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say I've watched that fan edit obviously this. And the thing about fan edits is that they're fascinating because like they're always going to be, and I want to call them out in this where I'm going to, maybe for Max's sake, call out when I noticed it. Meaning, like, when I haven't watched The Hobbit in a really long time, so I'm someone who it's like, there were scenes in this where I'm like, I didn't even remember this happened, right?
Well, there's something else I wanted to say up top too. Is I'm pretty sure they pulled from the extended versions. Because there's definitely stuff in this that I've never seen.
Okay.
And I've seen the first 2 Hobbit movies within the last 2 years. I've never successfully watched all 3. I've tried to twice, and I can't get through them.
Yeah, I've watched all 3 in theaters and never again.
Yikes!
So whenever
I saw the first one in theaters, and Marina's a diehard Lord of the Rings fan too. And after that first one, we were just like, we're all set.
Yeah, and I want to talk about it in that context too, which is like, so like with a fan edit, I think a fan edit's kind of a wish, and what I mean is that I noticed a few cuts where I'm like, that's awkward, but had that been on the page. Like, had that been
the transition would have been less awkward. Yeah, it's mostly that's when I noticed it. It's mostly there's some awkward transitions here because it's a fan edit. So like music will stop abruptly, or things won't. It'll just feel a little disjointed in some spots because it's a fan edit.
Right. There's but like the broad strokes of what that fan edit is saying. Mm-hmm. I will say, at least from what I've seen so far, I was like, yeah, I agree. That's I did. That's better.
Yeah. I wanted to say I'm enjoying this so far.
That was the other thing I wanted to say at the top of this is I haven't gone back and watched The Hobbits. Mm-hmm. And I will say we watched the first half of this, right? We ended where the spiders come. And I had to stop watching and I had to go do something else. And I got to say, if I was watching this just on my own, I wouldn't have stopped.
I didn't.
And what I mean,
I didn't. I had to stop. Like Dave and I had a time code to stop at, and we knew it was going to be in Mirkwood with the spiders.
Yeah.
I shot right past it without even paying attention. Like I watched 10 more minutes than we were supposed to for today because I was just in the story, and I think the other thing about a fan edit, at least what I'm gleaning from this one, because like I said, this is my first experience watching one, is it makes what was wrong with the original more tangible or more easier to elucidate, I guess. Yeah. And the main thing that this person has done with their fan edit is they're just cutting out all of the appendices stuff and they're just focusing on the party and their quest. And and like that's making it apparent to me, like the problem with the Hobbit movies is that they're meandering and boring and unfocused.
This is what's wild to me because I totally forgot about that. So I just wrote it down throughout because I forgot there was all this other bullshit.
There's they're talking much about other stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize it until I was watching this cut of it. And it's just like, man, if you just stay focused on the party and their journey, this thing moves. Like it keeps your attention.
Here's what's wild because sorry. It's because I do want to get at like what was the problem with the Hobbits.
Yeah.
And obviously length. I think there's a certain.
That's my main thing. Just to underline before you get going. Yeah. I feel like it was just meandering and boring as a result of being so unfocused on all these other, because they wanted to make it feel as epic as the original trilogy, right? So they beefed it up with all this stuff from the appendices, and it's just like it's so bloated and meandering and unfocused, and then it becomes dull. Okay, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, it's fine. And so like it was that, and then I would say the thing that you can't really fix in a fan edit is it felt rubbery sometimes. Meaning
a little bit, yeah.
Like that we were in a part where Peter Jackson didn't want to do them. Famously, he was like, I'm exhausted. I didn't want to do these. So it felt like he kicked way more to CGI than probably. Yeah. And there's some shots like in this, the Goblin Town, when they're like rolling that boulder. And I'm like, that just looks like a cartoon. There's like moments that are like, this just looks like a cartoon. But this reduced it way more. And like what it made me realize, and this is the weirdest reaction I had, is because it's focused on the quest, I'm like, I could use more of this. Like all of a sudden I was like, could there be a TV show of The Hobbit where you add it? Because what it occurs to me is what they always should have been, because the Lord of the Rings all right, that's fate of the universe. We're running around. We're skipping to all these places, right?
But everybody has the same goal. We're all moving in the same direction, and it's a very clear direction.
Yes. But what makes The Hobbit charming to me is more than Lord of the Rings. In fact, I think The Lord of the Rings is nothing like this. The Hobbit is like a D&D campaign. It feels like a D&D campaign. This version of The Hobbit, where it's like, oh, we're fighting the trolls, then we get loot. You know, like, oh, there's your loot. We all meet somewhere at the beginning. Like, this is the tavern, basically, but it's Bilbo's house.
It's Bilbo's house.
And here's everybody. Here's our goals.
And each encounter is less about. I mean, they have fights, but like the big encounters are about like thinking outside the box. Like you have to do something special to get by Gollum. You have to do something special to get by the trolls. You have to do something special to get by the wargs.
That's the other thing. They all have different powers. So Bilbo, when he's talking to the trolls, I'm like, oh, is he going to roll a 10? Is he going to roll a 1? Is he going to roll a 20? You know, like it's that feeling of like he's doing a charisma check. He's doing a persuasion or a deception check where it's like everybody has their own powers that they get to use like D&D. And so like, it's just funny because like what it comes down to is what made me realize is like the problems with the Hobbit films aren't length. It is focus.
Yeah.
It's like I could watch an entire Hobbit TV show where they add adventures along the way going to fucking rob this dragon. You know, like it's a heist. It's a heist film.
Gonna home invade this dragon.
Yeah.
Actually, he's squatting in their house, so he has it coming.
That's fair. Yeah. So like I don't know. That was neat to watch because like this really did refocus because everybody probably says like it's too long, and it's like that's not the problem. It really isn't. It is too
long, but it's you feel it because of all it's so unfocused.
It's padded out.
Yeah,
where it's like it's weird to say like, yeah, you should have just took more liberties. Like I've been watching Rings of Power, which is, can you imagine being a writer for a show where you're like, we have no source material. And make it
very
like
little. They're drawing from like appendices and stuff, but it's like
right.
But
it does a good job where it's like I'm imagining a writer just like how do elves fucking have conversations? They sound like assholes, right?
Yeah.
All right, make them sound like assholes. And so it's like that's got to be so much pressure to add like that. But I'm like, if you wanted to make 3 Hobbit films, one, don't. But if you wanted to, that's what you should have done. Just extend the adventure. Not add all that extra horse shit.
Yeah.
Because it's got the D&D vibes where it's like we're going to this town, then this town.
And I like that this one is like, I know a big complaint about the Hobbit trilogy was of its goofiness, but I like that it's goofy because
I think that's fine.
Yeah, because it's a children's story and it was written softer than Lord of the Rings, and it's a little bit more like a fairy tale because it's about like this little guy who doesn't want to go on an adventure, but then he finds his courage and he does go on an adventure. You know, it's like it's very simple, like moral stuff. I mean, Lord of the Rings is very black and white too in terms of morality, but like I like that this still has like the silliness. I like that this has all the songs.
Yeah, I was scared the songs weren't going to be there, and it's like, no, the songs.
But like, no, because the songs are part of like the animated Hobbit. Like everybody remembers the songs from that animated Hobbit, you know, and there's songs in the book too. So it's like also the piece of music that ends up being the theme of the movie that is around that one song that they sing the night before they leave.
Yeah,
I love that piece of music. Like
I like the soundtrack to this.
Yeah, like legitimately before this edit, like I liked the score of The Hobbit. It was one of the things it was the same thing with the Star Wars.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's Howard Shore, right?
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with the Star Wars prequels, where it was like, I don't like these movies, but the score for all 3 of them was really good.
Yeah, it's like John Williams watching the movies like, well,
yeah,
I can put out some bangers at least.
Like,
you know,
Duel
like
of the Fates and then Battle of the Heroes in episode 3.
I always think about this, how many movies ruined an awesome score, meaning that like I don't know what the score to like Lawnmower Man is, but what if it's awesome? You know what I mean? Like I always try to remember when a movie has a great score, whether or not it's good or not.
Man, there is one really weird one that has a great score that
there's a few.
I feel like we talk about a lot, and I can't remember what it is. Anyway.
Yeah, so the Hobbit. He gets home invasion. Gandalf really is like just a monster to the hobbits. I don't know.
He's a terrorist. He just shows up in Bag End and fuck shit up.
He's a wizard, so he can fucking do whatever he wants. And I was thinking, like, it's the equivalent of if I showed up outside your house, Tom, with a shotgun saying, "We're going to go on an adventure, Tom." Because it's that, where it's like, you can't say no, I guess. It's just like when he's wandering outside his house, just like, "Hey, you need an adventure in there. I know what's best for you." And it's like, dude, get the fuck away. It's terrifying.
It is not much different from the Scrooge "I think you should leave" sketch, where Sam Richardson teleports in from the future in a mech suit, and it's like, we gotta go on the boat. He's just rambling about an adventure that they have to go on.
Right.
It's not that much different from Gandalf telling him that they need to go kill the bonies.
And I think they had that instinct in here. It's very hard to make the question of like it's a larger question of like, what should the Hobbit be as opposed, like, because Lord of the Rings is perfect. I think those
pretty much. Yeah. Those are, yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple little things here and there.
Sure.
But like the question obviously is like, what is the Hobbit to that? And when I realigned it in my head, it's like, it should be a D&D campaign. And like, this has a little of it. But you're more, the source material more than me, obviously. I think I've never read The Hobbit.
I've read The Hobbit within the last 6 years.
Yeah, so you know it better than me. I feel like this really needed to lean into comedy. Like it's that thing where like Gandalf, for example, is more playful in this.
Yeah.
The stakes are lower.
It's like about it's softer. It's like it's more for kids. It feels a little bit more like a fairy tale almost.
Yeah, there's this idea of like the silly old wizard. Mm-hmm. I feel like we've seen that in a few things where it's like they act bumbling and they use that to be unassuming. And this is like Gandalf's version of that, like the version of Gandalf that when he shows up in the beginning of Lord of the Rings, everybody knows him as this playful character, with his fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, for me, it's like Lord of the Rings is where Gandalf has to get fucking real, right? Where he's like, this is fate of the earth. So I feel like I like this better when it's more of like, I'm just trying to teach Bilbo a lesson. And it's like Gandalf is always a little in control. And then there's like at least for the first 2 hours of this, there's a lot of like failure. Like, dealing with the trolls and stuff. Where, again, it feels like D&D, where it's like people are rolling ones a little bit here and there.
Right. It's like I was saying, each encounter, it's not, you have to deal with it not in a straight ahead way, usually. Like it's, the thing we thought that was going to work hasn't worked. Now we have to think on our feet. And yeah, that's role playing. Then that's also just, good writing.
Yeah.
But it does follow sort of a template. You're right. That is sort of like an RPG quest line, or it's very like storybook, like, like you get to a creature and you have to beat it in riddles.
Yes, and there's people imposing things on. So, like, still in the beginning, like the idea of Gandalf showing up, this silly old wizard basically being like, "You're going on an adventure," and then them imposing themselves on him and his little comfort, his amazing robe.
Pretty sweet robe.
Such hobbits, man. Hobbits, they know how to fucking relax. Although I will say, Hobbit holes more spiders probably than they're letting on.
Oh yeah, those things are loaded with spiders.
Yeah, like
that's why he could hear them before anyone else in Mirkwood. It's just because he speaks the spider tongue.
Is that a spoiler? Is there a reason he can hear him? I forgot about that.
No, I think it's just the ring.
Oh, that makes sense.
I think you could. I seem to remember in the book and in the animated Hobbit that the spiders just spoke, like you could just, like any other creature, like you just hear them. But in this one, it seems like he can sort of hear them, and then when he puts on the ring, he can hear them completely. So I think it's just like an evil thing, like, oh, he can hear evil things while he has the ring on, I guess.
You were talking about all the extra lore. Having not watched it for a while, like, can you recall what's missing from this?
All of the stuff with Radagast the Brown, all of the stuff with the White Orc. We don't see the White Orc until like an hour and 40 into this fan edit.
I noticed that you don't really know what the bad guys want. They're
just being chased by orcs, yeah.
And it works. That works fine. There's also parts where there was clearly like ring shit where Gandalf is like, I have to go.
He finds the Eye of Sauron in the beginning of Mirkwood, yeah. And there's a part there where he goes to like a council of Galadriel and Saruman. Like that was a whole scene, and all the stuff with Radagast, and there's a flashback to show you who the White Orc is, and they show like Thorin's dad fighting him. There is a lot of horse shit. Like they don't leave in the original cut, they don't leave Bag End until over an hour in the movie.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Because watching this cut, I'm like, because I knew that in my mind. I remember thinking that. And watching this cut, I'm like, what could they have possibly needed to do in Bag End?
Because like, they just stay focused on the group and the through line. You know, I can tell things have been trimmed, but like.
Yeah, I marked, so when the title shows up, when he's blowing the smoke ring, it starts on the smoke ring. So I knew there was a cut there because it's like naturally you'd want to start with, it felt like an abrupt cut going into the title.
Yeah.
That was the first cut I noticed. And honestly, I didn't notice a cut for a while. But like, yeah, I guess there was a lot of, like, I knew again, there was a lot of bullshit at Bag End.
Yeah, there's a whole lot. It takes him so goddamn long to leave Bag End.
It's ridiculous.
It's excruciating.
Because they show it here. All they need is him to be like self-contemplating overnight and then deciding to go with them.
Right, like all that happens in that scene, it's Gandalf shows up, I'm going to show up later with some dwarves. Because I remember you're a hobbit that likes adventure. The dwarves show up. They tell him what the deal is. They offer him the job as the burglar. He doesn't want to take it. Gandalf is like, but you used to like to go on adventures. Whatever happened to that hobbit? And then they leave him the contract. And he wakes up the next morning and they've gone and he sees the contract there. He's like, I do want to go on an adventure. And he runs and joins them. That shouldn't take fucking 90 minutes, Dave.
Yeah, and it doesn't in this. And I don't know.
No, it takes like 25 minutes in this. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know what it could have added because it's like I don't even need them to film anything. A flashback of him thinking about being an adventurer. No. Like you get all that from performance of like, he's thinking about it and he decides like because they have him wake up. They do a good moment, and I'm sure this is obviously in the
of course
the full cut. He wakes up and he's like happy they're gone for a second, and then he gets sad.
Yeah,
because you see him sort of like he's like wants them to leave, and then as they all are sitting down, he starts like getting to know them and gets settled into them, and then they're gone, and he's actually sad, and that's all you need to show that it's like he does want a little adventure in him, doesn't he?
That was something else that I wanted to say about the fan edit because it's holding my attention actually.
Yeah.
Whereas the original cuts, the actual movies don't. I'm actually getting to notice and study and appreciate the performances and the filmmaking more. Like I'm noticing the performances more, and they're really good. Like I always remembered liking Richard Armitage a lot as Thorin. I thought he was good.
Is that Sexy Dwarf? Is that Sex Dwarf?
He's the leader. He's the angry guy.
We have to wait for Sex Dwarf.
Yeah. There's another Sex Dwarf, the Keeley, I think.
There's a few Sex Dwarfs.
There's two.
They're all
ones.
technically Sex Dwarfs, depending on your taste. But yeah, he's really good. Martin
Freeman is very good. His is the one that I'm noticing more in this cut because there's a lot of stuff where it's just quiet moments where it just has to play on a look on his face between him and Gandalf or something like that. And of course, those moments are in those are in the actual movies. It's just I feel like they're so sprawling and your focus is so split that it's like I'm just getting back into these characters and their relationships when I'm pulled over to fucking Radagast riding his stupid rabbit sled in a scene that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and what the point is, because so it's called The Hobbit. So I'm like, it stands to reason that you make it from the point of view of the Hobbit. And all you have to, obviously you could have some scenes where the Hobbit isn't there and they're kidnapped, but for the most part, follow the Hobbit. And this has to be this idea that like, yeah, there's an implied bigger world, but they're keeping him in the dark from it. So we should be, and it's sort of like, this is my interpretation is you look at Lord of the Rings, and one of the things that isn't abrupt about Lord of the Rings, but it's like, because like I'm learning about this world as it's giving it to me. Yeah. So I'm not like being like, this doesn't make sense. But the hobbits in that are way more keen to adventure. And in fact are kind of like, they're talking about adventures. It's like, you know, Bilbo's more like a legend in the town. There's obviously the hobbits that are set in their ways, but like Frodo and Sam
they're
and
the younger
hobbits.
Like, I think we're seeing Bilbo's effect on them. Yeah,
exactly. They get thrown into an adventure and they just go with it.
Yeah.
Like in that first movie, like they're just like, oh shit, now we're like out and about. Like poor Sam. Like, I always think about this. Sam was just, like, out drunk. And Frodo. They were just, like, they went to the bar. Frodo went to the bar, probably got high, came home, and there was that freaky wizard hiding in his house with his shotgun.
Is it secret?
Just like,
is it safe?
And then Sam and then Merry and Pippin were out doing whatever.
Merry and Pippin were out getting mushrooms.
And it's like, I think about how
they were stealing, like, radishes from Farmer Maggot's yard or whatever.
It's like if I went to Rite Aid and I was like, man, I can't wait to go home. I got to take a dump. I'm going to play some video games. And again, if you showed up with a shotgun and you're like, we got to go, man, we're going to Peru.
Dave, we got to go to Mount Doom.
Yeah. And it's like, shit. And so
Mount
that's all
Doom,
to say
I just
that,
bought
like,
some combos.
Yeah. It's all to say that this movie is sort of, it's focused on the Hobbit and about what broke out, what created this mentality for the rest, this book, you know, what passed it on, this, because like they hint at previous adventures, obviously, but like to me, this is like about the Hobbit culture almost, and like what created this sense of adventure in their little fucking shire and shit like that. So like, yeah, just focusing on a character piece around the Hobbit. And like this small stakes D&D adventure, we don't have to talk about the fate of the fucking world here. It's way nicer that way.
Yeah. And that was another part of the split focus too, is all the extra stuff with Saruman and the necromancer and Radagast and all that other crap. It was splitting our focus into like it was another Sauron threat. It was like a big world threat, like teasing Lord of the Rings. And,
yeah, they were trying to make it as big.
Yeah, and it just made both stories unsatisfying.
Right.
Like it takes away from the story of them trying to get to the Lonely Mountain, because like you said, that's comparatively like so low stakes.
It's all about goal. It really is, because I think of like Lord of the Rings. You think about like before that, Independence Day. Obviously, Lord of the Rings was written before the movie Independence Day. But the idea of a large-scale disaster film where you're skipping about a lot of stories, Roland Emmerich is like scattered with who's the main character. But like Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings, it's like Frodo is the main character, but it does branch out by the like you forget after a while. Where like by the Two Towers, it'll cut back to Frodo and Sam, and you're like, right, it's their story. But like it starts about them and then it balloons into an ensemble and it sort of ends on them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, but the reason that can work and the reason that Avengers was able to do it, and because it's all still common goal, right? It's all we're all going towards the same thing. And yeah, it's like tries to do that, but it's just this larger, broader goal that has nothing to do with the movies. And that is so distracting.
Yeah. And so much time is spent on it in the original films. So that's all blessedly gone in this fan edit.
And so it's like it doesn't feel bigger, but it does feel like if you focus on it as a character piece, it doesn't matter how big or small it is. It's just a lot of fun.
It still feels epic. Like you still, it still has all of those those iconic Lord of the Rings shots, those sweeping landscape shots of people walking over mountains and shit. So it still feels like this big sprawling epic quest that they're traveling over this great distance through, mountains and woods and all this cool stuff.
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't need to feel like the whole world's involved.
It's sort of the same as the prequels, where you look at the prequels and you go like, okay, what was your goal? If your goal was, I want an origin story for Darth Vader, it's like, well, there doesn't need to be wars. There doesn't need to be the fate of everything. Just talk about how did this guy's world fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And so like,
so you would start it with the Clone Wars, right? Because like the Fanedit does, apparently.
And it would be about his personal life and his personal, where it's like they're trying to like win this broader, we're getting where it's like, do we even need to know how the Empire got in power if we're just, but it's about, what is the goal? Because you could say the prequels aren't about that, but it's sort of like, the prequels have that problem where it's like they want to be the fate of the universe again. But I guess they aren't. I guess there's no Death Star to their credit. I
don't think the prequels have that problem.
Yeah, I guess they're
the
just
Fall
unfocused.
of the Republic is a pretty, by that third movie, the Fall of the Republic is a pretty clear.
It's a pretty big.
Yeah.
But there's like an unfocused feeling. I don't know. I guess it's also like we need 3 movies.
Definitely when you watch them as a trilogy, it's like, okay, what are we doing now?
Yeah, I think the trilogy, and that's the problem with The Hobbit, where they're like, it's almost like some money guy being like, well, we got 3 movies last time.
But we got to have 3 movies.
Yeah, we need to make sure we can make this much money over this many years or something like that.
Exactly.
All right, so going back to the cut itself, one thing that I did ping is some of the character stuff took a hit. And what I mean is, what's his name? Sex Hobbit or sex dwarf Thorin. Thorin like really turns on Bilbo faster.
He does, yeah.
Like it feels a little more abrupt that I'm like, why is everybody so mad at Bilbo? So I didn't know if there was something cut there.
No, and it's really just Thorin who's mad at Bilbo.
Yeah.
But it does it kind of fires back up once they get out of the Goblin Cave, and it does kind of feel like out of nowhere.
Yeah,
because Thorin's like gloomy and stuff, but he's still like generally, I don't know. Nobody's really been on Bilbo's ass, and then sort of out of the blue, he's just kind of really super pissed at Bilbo.
Yeah. One of the cuts that I noticed real quick, or before that I wondered, is they do the troll. They get the loot in the troll cave, and I can see where I know, like, this is a bit again where I'm like, oh, I wish they wrote it this way. Because they say, like, how did the trolls get all the way up here? And they're like, there must be a cave nearby. And then they go in the cave, and then they go, all right, time to leave the cave. And then what we did in the fan edit is they have the wolves attack, and then Gandalf goes, like, in this cave, guys. And it's like, that should have been the same cave. Right? Like, that would have extended, because they asked the question, like, how did the trolls get all the way out here? It's like, there's a cave, and it's like, oh, let's go in the cave, and that could have gotten them to the goblin town.
Well, no, because the place to get after that is Rivendell.
Oh, right, you're right, it's Rivendell. Yeah. All right. But you see, like, the fan
it could have been the same.
Pinged that.
Like, yeah, because...
Like, I don't know what goes on between those 2 moments, but it's wild that there were 2 caves in this movie.
It's because we're following the White Orc and the Orc party and stuff, because that villain and those orcs, that's not in the book. So
yeah,
I think you can't really delete them from the movie, because they get like entwined in a lot of like pivotal moments, and then the orcs involved in the climax, I think, too. So
yeah, I think what this cut needed, like, that didn't exist, is like, because I agree, like, toning down, like, you think of how the orcs were treated in Lord of the Rings, right? Where there's always like the big tough orc, and you're like, that's the general. Like, you just need a scene of like that one orc, like, being like, like giving commands. Like you needed a scene where an orc would be like, they got away, and the orc like slaps or kills that guy. You know what I mean? Like that mini boss vibe. And they don't have those scenes.
No,
because they didn't make them.
They made different ones where it's like
too much.
The orc has like this big introduction, and there's a flashback, and it's like Gandalf talking about him with like Saruman and Galadriel and Elrond, I think. Like he does have a big introduction, and we see him a lot. Like he's one of the people we keep cutting to away from the main group in the original film. But it still kind of works in this version. It just would have been cleaner if it had been written this way, where we're hearing about the orcs that are following them, and we keep seeing the wolves that are riding up ahead of the orcs and attacking them, and they keep escaping the wolves. And then what we finally see at like the hour 40 mark, we finally see the orcs themselves, and that's when we see the white orc. And it's pretty clear he's in charge just from the way he looks.
Yeah, that is so much. So, okay.
So that's a cool way to do it. Like we've just been hearing about them, following them when we know they're back there, and then we finally see them. So it's like, I wish it had been written this way.
Yes. There's a lot of that, because like there is a line that Gandalf mentions they ran into orcs at dinner before the orcs are actually seen. And I was like, I wish we could cut out that line. And like at first it's like they do like wolf attacks. They just focus on like the wolves are coming, and like,
or wargs or whatever they're called.
Wargs, whatever, fucking just say wolves. Just say wolves token.
They're super wolves.
Yeah. They're werewolves.
No, there's a werebear. That's different.
But they introduce the sting, sword.
The sting.
And they say the sting. And they say like it glows blue when orcs and goblins and shit are nearby. So they had, and I forgot about this moment, and it's wild to me that this isn't the moment that introduced the visuals of the orcs, which is when they're in that weird ass trap, that when they're in the cave that seems to be apparently what weird luck that was. And he gets up and he goes like, what is that? And he looks down and he sees it glowing. It's wild to me that because it's like a horror moment. They like the music and stuff.
There's a couple of moments like that where you're like, oh, there's Peter Jackson.
Right. And it's wild that wasn't what in the original cut was the first time we saw the orcs. It's wild that they were seen before that, because that's treated like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park being seen for the first time, where it's like, oh, here they fucking come. And it's like there should have been a version where the wargs, like you see the wargs and you like hear the orcs and you know they're being commanded by the orcs. Like the weird reference in Predators, where they have the predator dogs and you hear their whistles, but you don't see the predators. Like it should have been that, where it's like we're being chased by this unseen thing and they're commanding. That would have been so much cooler. And I think this cut is trying to do that.
Yeah.
And it is more effective.
That sting moment is good.
It's really good. Yeah. There is some like the
golem scene is great. Like it's such a classic scene from literature.
Golem, yeah.
And so to see it played out in live action is cool anyway, and it's a very well done scene. Both performances are amazing. It's so well directed. It's creepy.
Yeah, they're really good at their depiction of Gollum, because like in the books, or the Hobbit cartoon, he's always been like a cartoon fairy tale ogre, which is like, answer my riddles or I will eat you. Like it's that ogre. And it's like there's that weird like random fantasy rule. In this, it feels like you're talking to someone who's like on edge and they're holding a gun. Like you're talking someone down. And that I feel like was missing from the Hobbit cartoon. And like I don't know if it's in the books, but it just feels more scary when it's like he's doing the riddles to like keep Gollum busy more than it is about like, you must answer these riddles 3. You know what I mean? Like, and Gollum feels just way more of a terrifying, where he's just like on edge and he's twitchy and he's like, God, he's going to fucking bash you with a rock if you don't keep his attention for long enough. Like he's just like succumbing to this darkness. And it's just really, it is so much more tense and creepy. That he like briefly disappears while doing
that's so good. Yeah. When he's delivering his last riddle. that's part of what something I was about to point out in the scene is he does a great job of slowly kind of, in a way that feels like the noose is tightening, but he's slowly showing you that when the scene starts, you feel like Bilbo has the clear advantage because he has the sword. Yeah. But as the scene progresses, it's like, no, Gollum can kill him in an instant.
Yeah.
In a number of ways.
The other good Peter Jackson moment is when they go into the fucking bog or the haunted forest,
Mirkwood,
and they go off the trail. I love that sequence where he's like looking down, he's walking backwards and not forwards.
Yeah,
time is going weird.
Every part of Mirkwood I was really enjoying. The way it's filmed, like the set of it, the sounds that play through it. Like it's just this eerie, like the creaking, and then there's like this very low whispering in there. And then like when he climbs the trees to see the sun, and then they kind of do a version of the Jurassic Park thing where the trees are moving towards him and nobody's answering him.
Yeah, because it's depicting this like magic that's like very cerebral. And so I like that.
It's confusion. Yeah, it's like a confusion sleep spell that they're under.
Exactly, yeah.
And he turns around and sees himself.
And
all these other weird things.
That's the second film, right? This cut,
that's
so
in the
what we've watched
film,
so far is mostly the first movie.
Yes.
My anticipation is that the second film will be greatly reduced. I don't know.
Well, I've already...
Like, where's the Hobbit end, the actual story?
The first movie?
No, I mean the story, the Tolkien story. Where does the Hobbit...
Oh, it ends after the Battle of the Five Armies, and then Bilbo goes back home.
So that's actually in there?
That's in it, but it's a chapter. It's very brief.
So I might be wrong. I feel like maybe that this third one is going to be the most...
Well, it's the shortest anyway. Like, it was like 2 hours when it hit the theaters.
Yeah, what I'm really wondering is, what is the episode 1 of this? What is the one where the Fanedit is like, we don't need most of this? And it probably is 5 armies, yeah.
It feels like it's going to be 5 armies, and honestly, a big chunk of The Hobbit. Because the theatrical release of The Hobbit is like 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's not even the extended version. And we're out of The Hobbit by like an hour 40 in this cut.
The Eagles are the moment, right? Because if I remember, it ends.
There's
really
a moment where he's like looking at the sunset with Gandalf, and they talk about the quest some, and it's right after they've been rescued by the Eagles. That's where the first movie ends.
And that always felt weird. This is a different conversation, but like I've always wondered, like, okay, if they did the original 2 movies, where would the movies end? The original, like Peter Jackson wrote them out, and they were 2. And I feel like it would
end with them getting to the Lonely Mountain.
Okay,
and then
the first one,
and then the second one would begin with Smaug.
Okay, that's interesting because what they do is it's real weird. It's real weird because if I remember, the second film ends with Smaug getting away, and then him going like, "Oh no," and then that's it. It's like a weird cliffhanger, and then the beginning of 3 is them killing Smaug.
Yes.
And that feels like that should have been the resolution of one of them.
It does. It's a weird spot for it. And it's what happens when you split one story into multiple parts.
Yeah. So I'm almost like the first one should have just been, well, it depends on what you want to worry about, because it's like,
I guess the first one
armies, if that was just a chapter where it's like, okay, that shouldn't have been anything then.
You could, because kind of what like a lot of the second and third movies are focused on is Thorin getting his home back and then going crazy.
Yeah.
Like becoming the gold crazy despot that he was sort of fated to become, or was warned that he might become. So yeah, you might be right. Like maybe the original plan was to end it with them killing Smaug, and then the second movie would be Thorin, his stubborn shittiness leading to the Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah, I don't know if that would have been better or worse.
I don't know.
It's like
it'd still been a weak ass second movie either way.
It's wild because I'm trying to think
real front loaded series.
Right. In my head I was like we're not going to get much of the first movie, and then watching this fan edit I was like, yeah, I guess there is a lot of stuff.
They put a lot in the first
movie
one
that's load bearing.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's not necessary to the plot? And it's like, I guess the Five Armies shit, it didn't need to be as big. I can't even tell you what goes on in that movie. Where I'm like, I know there's a lot of bullshit.
I think it's just a big Two Towers-esque battle scene. It's just a battle scene.
Legolas is there, but it's like
Legolas
2 hours.
is there, yeah.
Yeah. I think that it was focused, but then I'm like, all right, if that was focused on now I'm like, okay, well, what the hell's in 2? And we're seeing a little of it in this cut.
Yeah,
and this kind of is making me go like stand back and go like, what the fuck was in these? Like what this is watching this told efficiently. I'm like, yeah, this is all you need. The fuck did they spend all their time on in those other ones and the long ones? Like, I can't think of what this story needs.
It's so much meandering stuff. Like I said, in the first movie, it's a lot of Gandalf and Radagast and this thing with the necromancer and Galadriel and Saruman and stuff. In the second movie, it's a lot of stuff with the elves. That's where they bring Legolas and they give him a love story with Evangeline Lilly. The barrels happens in the book and in the cartoon as well.
But
that's how they get out of the elves.
I forgot about all the elves shit.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck.
But like the second movie spins out into whole other subplots about the elves. Like Legolas is there, like you said, and he has got a subplot, and then like his dad's an asshole and there's a whole subplot there. And
right. Because my other take is like, my weird takes is like you could have made a mini series of if you focused it on like a D&D adventure, but this cut, there's still shit that I'm like, oh, you could have cut that out too. Like I think the Eagles could cut out the Eagles completely, because they do in this cut they get pinned down by the dogs.
The
Eagles save them. Yep, the Eagles save them, and then in this cut, it goes into the next film where they're still being chased by the dogs, and I'm like, oh, they don't need to be saved then. Just have them be chased by the dog, like have them get like them come out of the Goblin Town, the dogs go after them, and they're still being chased by the dogs from the second.
Yeah,
and then they go to the bear.
Yeah. Beorn or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's an extended thing. I don't remember him in the version of the second movie that I saw. Or maybe he is in it.
I remember him. I remember him with his weird sideburns. Yeah.
I've only seen that one once. So.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, Max, who cut this, you could probably get rid of the Eagles altogether. I really do think you could just get rid of them. The Eagles were they in the Hobbit books? Were they in the books?
They're one of the armies at the end.
That's all you need. Because this felt like,
I'm pretty sure
this felt like a producer being like, you got to do the Eagles, man. You got to have Gandalf do the moth trick. It's like his power. It's like his signature move. And I was like, he already did it in Lord of the Rings. I don't need him to do it again.
I think the reason maybe was to set up them showing up later, but like this was,
I wouldn't have been
initially
confused.
That was like one part in the first movie, and we weren't going to see the Eagles for 2 more movies, so it was like, we don't really need to plant this seed here. So yeah, you could cut that. You could cut that.
The Eagles just make the
sure.
I was thinking I kind of want a Lord of the Rings from the perspective of the Eagles, just having a great time, because all they do is they just fly around, look down, they go like, man, looks like a lot's going on
pretty
down
wild
there.
Down there.
Yeah.
Check out that tower.
Yep, and then one of them's like, Gandalf's calling. Do you want to go pick someone up? And they're like, yeah, fuck it. Let's go ping some. They're like Uber drivers in Middle Earth.
We can poop on some ants on the way.
Yeah, fuck it. Like, they just seem chill. They just seem like they're having just a great time up there. But yeah, I did not need them in this.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, man, I am so
honestly, I would have written the Orcs out. Because they're just...
So they weren't in the books?
No, they're not being pursued.
Books.
They're not being pursued by a big white orc.
Why? Yeah.
That was just to add an antagonist for the trilogy.
it's clear that they are trying, like this cut is trying to cut them out, but like they're kind of load bearing.
They're woven into too many load bearing scenes, unfortunately.
It's really funny, the instinct to have the orcs chase them, because like
they're already in a hurry. They have to get to the
Exactly.
Lonely Mountain before Durin's Day.
You don't need to herd them. They're going somewhere. Like it's the same with if you watch the first Lord of the Rings, or they don't get chased in that one as well. They're chasing the orcs in the second one, but it's like you don't need to give them something pushing them, because they're
already moving in this direction. Yeah, like because the orcs chase them to Baron's house, and then they just spend the night at his house, and it's like the orcs were never there. Like they don't try to get in the house or anything.
Right.
And then the next day they go to Mirkwood. Anyway.
Yeah. No, you could have them have like a run in, right? Where it's like, we need to get away. Let's go to the fucking bear. Let's go to this bear's house. But like, you don't need it being like, this through line.
I don't mind.
It implies, like, I don't know why, and maybe this is in the Peter Jackson cut. I don't know what the orcs need with them. You know what I mean? Where I'm like,
the White Orc wants to kill Thorin, I think, because he's got like beef with his family.
Right.
Like I said, they just created an antagonist for it. I don't necessarily mind the orcs because it gives them like some interstitial little fighting to do, and the fighting in Lord of the Rings is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it leads to kind of, I don't know. I don't necessarily mind them there. It's just they could if they were going to be there, I would have written them into the movie a little differently, like the way he's trying to do, or they're trying to do with this cut.
I think they're worried because I get this, because it's anti-storytelling to have a series of vignettes. Like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. But that's how we kind of used to do fantasy. Like, you watch the Sword in the Stone, the Disney.
That is just vignettes, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, and then this, and then this, and then this. Alice in Wonderland, and then this, and then this, and then this. And that style, the thing that both of those stories have in common, is it's about a everyman or a grounded character being thrown into adventures, and the actual through line is their arc. It's about a character growing, right? And so it's like, that's all I needed. Like, Bilbo is the arc. His growth is the through line. So it's like, it can be this, like, and then they have this adventure, and then they have this, because every new adventure builds the dynamic between them, which is what's actually important.
It's basically a road movie.
Yes, it's a road trip movie. Thank you. Yeah. And so it's like they shied away from it, and they wanted to have like some sort of larger through line while still having those adventures, and it just feels so like
unnecessary,
disjointed. Yeah.
It's just distracting, bro. They do. They burn the forest down. It's dope.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
It's one thing that I noticed more in this fan edit and enjoyed a lot, is how they show quick little ways that Gandalf uses his magic in the fights. Like, you mentioned the effect doesn't look great, but I like when he uses the boulder in the goblin cave to just roll ahead of them to knock all the goblins out of the way.
I like the D&D shit.
Yeah,
I like him doing like spells and like
and then
hitting the boulder for the to get the trolls turned into stone. And
in this scene, he's lighting the pine cones and throwing them to set the forest on fire to get rid of the, it's using his magic and cool little, exactly. Yeah.
Which it makes me think, like, I don't, D&D is what, the 80s? Like it makes
70s, like, I think, but
it's after The Hobbit. The book,
it's famously, unabashedly, admittedly drawn from Lord of the Rings.
Of course. But then what's interesting is when I watch the Lord of the Rings movies, I don't think, how does this translate to D&D? Mm-hmm. When I watch this version of The Hobbit, I see how someone could read this and go like, this should be a game. Like, I see how you would look at this adventure and go like, oh, you can just keep tacking on adventures, and everybody has their own little powers and their own strengths and weaknesses. Like, this little guy talks his way through things, this guy uses magic. So it just feels where
this guy eats a lot and falls asleep.
Exactly. It's just funny because it feels so naturally a D&D thing watching this. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I didn't notice the effects as much. Fucking Rivendell bums me out every time I see it in this.
Yeah, the Shire did a little bit too in some shots, just because of the artificial light that's supposed to be exterior. Like, so much of this was done on a green screen, even exterior stuff.
The oneer where Gandalf's running around made me sad. When he's running around the dwarves and everybody at Bilbo's, knowing that that's just Ian McKellen on a green screen. And there's some parts where the eye lines don't match up where you can sort of tell. And I know Ian McKellen famously cried on set.
Yeah, because he didn't have anybody to act with.
Yeah, and I was watching that scene and being like, this is such a lively scene. Everybody's running around, except Ian McKellen isn't actually there. It's a scene to show togetherness. And one of the main actors, the one you're following in the shot, isn't there. That's so sad. Like, of course he fucking cried, you know?
Yeah.
They could have found ways to
This movie
get
made Ian
that.
McKellen cry.
Yeah.
How dare you?
And I see why. It's really isolating, yeah. Because again, like I think The Hobbit it's all about characters. It's not about the fate of the world. Everything is its interactions. There's so many moments, like the Smaug and the fucking Gollum, where it's like the whole idea is like a little guy talking to a big guy, and it's just talking, you know. It's all about that. It's just about characters talking for the most part. Mm-hmm. Like there's so many scenes, the trolls as well, where you forget where it's like, it's not really about fighting. It's about like...
No, Bilbo kind of meets everybody on equal footing. He talks to all of them. Well, except for the spiders, but fuck them.
Yeah, but like it's mostly like if he can roll those charisma checks, that's what he's going to do.
Yeah. He tries talking to Smaug.
Yeah. I would too. If I could
give it a
friends
shot
with a dragon, I would.
Yeah, what am I going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll give talking a shot.
But yeah, there's some effect stuff. There's a shot of CG horses a few times where I was like, just use a horse.
Yeah,
man.
just use a horse, man. I had the memory came blasting back into my brain that all of the orcs and goblins in this are digital. Like they didn't do a single person which sucks because they looked so gnarly and cool in the original Lord of the Rings.
Did you watch this when you watched it in theaters with the 60 frame rate, 60 frames per second?
No, I did not see that version, which apparently just looked like daytime soap opera.
It shook me. It shook me watching it. It was haunting to watch. And that's the thing. That's what's very funny. It's actually a problem with AI art now, which is that like it's hard to describe, but like something looking photoreal doesn't mean it looks real.
No.
And it's so hard to describe because like I think as people get older, I'm sure there'll be people who are used to it who won't have this reaction. But looking at, like, if you look at Rivendell in The Lord of the Rings and it's a matte painting, and it's like a gorgeous matte painting, and it's dreamy, and it's not like crisp, and there's like a vibe to it where it's like you feel like this is a magical place. It's a beautiful fantasy place where when you see it here, and it looks like a video game, where it's like everything's crisp and in focus. And like you can see all the grains, all the little like drops of water in the waterfall. It looks faker to me. And it's like, and when I say faker,
there's also a sheen to it too when you do it like this, which is a thing that I noticed in AI art. And then in 60 frames per second. Yeah, and 60 frames per second too, seeing it, where it was like, I know it looks more photoreal, but I've lost the thread. I am no longer in the story. That's what it comes down to, right? Where it's like, it's taking me out of the movie is, of course, the phrase everybody says, where it's like, it just suddenly, it's like a jolt. And it reminds me, right, I'm watching a movie. It doesn't bother me as much because...
It depends on the movie, too.
Yeah, it can be, obviously... I guess it's just this one is so effects heavy. I don't notice it as much in this fan edit.
Right.
And also to me,
that's what I was going to say. I didn't.
Yeah.
And part of it is I'm also watching a copy of it that might have not the high, like again, watching it in a theater, crisp 60 frames per second probably played into that for me.
Also, I don't know if this is the case for the Hobbit releases, but I do know for the Lord of the Rings releases, they continued to tweak the effects when they came out on video.
Yeah.
Like, they changed Gollum, remember? He was different in Fellowship, and that because they hadn't finalized his design, I guess, when it initially released in theaters. So he looked different in the theatrical release, but when they put it on DVD, they changed it so that he looks like the way he does in the rest of the movies.
Yeah, it's hard, man, because
so I don't know if they did that in this one. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, it's sort of a fine line, because I would say fixing the visual effects of your movie over time. Like, if they put out a new Lord of the Rings cut and they called it the remastered cut, and Gollum looked even more photorealistic, I don't know if I'd have a problem with it. Well, but if they said, all right, we're going to take all the models and replace them, I would have a problem with that. All the matte paintings and replace them. It's the Lucas, right? If it's like, oh, I'm going to like replace all the shots with CGI and throw a bunch more CGI shit. Mm-hmm. It's like, take the stuff that's already CGI and like refine it. I'm like, I guess.
What about, because this is it's kind of an interesting question. One thing I wanted to say real quick before we move totally on from the thought is, the digital backgrounds don't bother me as much because to me, it's just another type of matte painting. It's just painted 100%. With different tools. I prefer matte paintings in a lot of contexts, but that could just be because I'm an old fart.
No, like a good example is you haven't been watching Rings of Power, have you?
No.
Rings of Power, I didn't look into it. I imagine a lot of CGI. And like it's the Fincher thing where it's like Fincher uses so much CGI backgrounds you don't even realize it. Mm-hmm. Where it's like Rings of Power, I don't mind because I think it's this consistency and it looks nice.
Yeah.
I think for me, The Hobbit also just didn't look as nice. Like Rivendell, again, it just, I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on it because I don't have a problem with CGI matte paintings. Mm-hmm. That does seem a good use for it. CGI in general, it's like, it really is context. You know, it's doing the thing and putting CGI, and it's like, well, that kind of ruins the point of what I'm looking at, you know?
I think in the original versions of these movies, there's more whiplash involved, I guess.
Right,
between what's practical and then it's just so heavy in some so heavily digital in a lot of this movie.
I think fantasy to me, it's like I think matte paintings classic. I think classic, and like Lord of the Rings. It's funny because like I don't have this problem with Star Trek. For example, is Star Trek Picard has a lot of like characters from like it has the shapeshifters in it. And they've revamped the CGI completely. And you're like, what a awesome, it's cool to get to see like a fully photorealistic shapeshifter now. I don't look at that and go like, it takes me out of it because it's not like DS9. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, so like, it really depends. It was something specifically about Rivendell and the Goblin Town where there's something about it where it's like overly detailed. Like there's too much detail.
It starts to look muddy.
Yeah, it's like too crisp. And everything felt like it was in focus. It looks like, it's funny. It's weird to say. It looks like I'm looking at a model, but in a bad way. Where it's also these wides, these big wides, these sweeping. It's a lot of that. We've talked about this before, where if the camera work isn't grounded, it takes you out because it reminds you that it's just
not a real space. Yeah.
And then them kind of running around and being kind of rubbery within it. Like there was a shot here of like Frodo, Bilbo falling when he falls in Goblin Town. And it's like him like hanging on the rope and then falling. There's later when Legolas does like the running on the falling bricks where it's like this rubbery cartoon shit where there's just something about it has no weight. It's shot in a wide. And so like the wide makes you feel like not really attached to what's happening. It looks like a video game. Like it looks like Little Big Planet, if that makes sense, where it's like these side scroller game shots where you're just like, I don't feel like it feels like Peter Jackson was like, I don't want to have to shoot a bunch of shots for this. Let's just do a wide. of this action.
Might have been it.
Yeah. Because again, it's not necessarily the CGI. It's a combination of things.
And it certainly didn't save them money. These movies cost way more than the original trilogy.
Yeah, and it feels impossible because you kind of know, like, okay, a stuntman isn't doing that. It's like these CGI. You know, like when he falls in the Goblin Town. You remember that part,
yeah, when
right?
he falls into Gollum's hole.
Yeah,
right?
And like when he first falls, it's him and that other orc.
The goblin
like,
that Gollum eats. Just
and they're like,
beating him in the face
like,
with a rock over and over again.
Yeah.
It's great.
And he like grabs onto the piece of bridge, and it's like this one shot that it's moments like that. Or like, again, the rolling of the rock where it's done in this weird wide. It's not done from anybody's perspective.
No, it's like the sky cam in an NFL game.
Right. And there are shots like that in Lord of the Rings.
There's a lot of shots like that in Lord of the Rings.
Right. But I feel like they used them in better places there. But I'm not... Again, it's hard. I'd have to like look at each shot and really like think about what is it that's taking me out of these moments, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes like you can use those wides to show the scale,
mm-hmm.
right? And I guess what it is it doesn't feel like we're showing scale in those moments. Like when they're
to a degree, because we're kind of showing how big and subterranean Goblin Town is and kind of this winding path that they're on. It reminded me of them fleeing. It was quoting the scene of them fleeing Moria.
Yeah. Here's a comparison, I guess, is the whole "You Shall Not Pass" sequence. So leading up to it, there are wides when they're jumping from those like broken bridges to each other. And it's to show like the depth and scale. But then when Gandalf falls, it's not this like weird wide shot. No, you know, it's about two people looking at each other. And it's like when Bilbo falls here, it should have been about him seeing his friends being left, you know, like reaching out to his friends. It could have been a tight shot. It should be a moment, an emotional moment, and it's shot in this weird wide.
Yeah,
I think we can explore it more. Any other thoughts?
No, just I'm enjoying this a lot more than any other time I've attempted to watch The Hobbit. And like I said, I think
it's way easier to watch. It's downright fun.
Yeah. And apart from being able to experience the Hobbit story in a way that's actually enjoyable, I think the other thing that's really cool about this fan edit is like we've been saying, is that it's sort of really making it clear what exactly was my issue with the original, with the films, the way that they exist.
Yeah. Fan edits will do that where you're like, oh yeah, no, this is better.
Yeah, this is better. Why is it better? That crap. Yeah.
I'm genuinely enjoying
so much
this
stuff with Radagast and the Necromancer and geez.
Yeah. This is the way to watch the Hobbits in my opinion right now, where I'm like, okay, I have a couple nitpicky things. Goblin music, they act like it's so bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Goblin music's fine.
It's not any worse than some of their dwarf songs.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. They're so dramatic.
Like the one Boffer sings at Rivendell, that wasn't one of their hits.
Yeah. No,
that wasn't much better than the Goblin song.
Exactly.
So.
It's fucking fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
This is more of a question, and this is something I think doesn't get achieved in the Lord of the Rings movies at all. I'm unclear of the size of the hobbits. It's weird in terms of their sneak abilities. So like what I think of is like, remember that scene in Lord of the Rings? I forget which one. I think it's the second one where they put the sheet or the blanket over them and they look like a rock.
That's in the third one, I think.
Third one. And the orc just like doesn't see them. And I always thought like, that's weird. Like I would notice if it was just a person with a fucking blanket on them. I'd be like, why would you think I would think you're a rock? But I guess the implication is the blanket kind of looks craggy and the hobbits are small. Like there's this running theme that hobbits are small enough to go unnoticed. And I think in this, where in the goblin like town, he just ducks.
He just crouches
and
down.
They go up. And I'm like, they're not that small. Like, I don't know.
They're the size of small children.
Right. And if I were trying to kidnap children, I keep track of those children. That's what I mean, where it's like, that's not small enough to go unnoticed.
I think he's like 3 feet tall, right?
If he's like 3 feet tall, then maybe I can see that, because then they duck down.
Because the dwarves are also like 4 feet tall. And he is, like a little bit shorter than most of the dwarves.
How big are the goblins?
The goblins are also very tiny. Except for the Goblin King. That's what I mean.
So relative to each other, it doesn't feel like he could just duck. I don't know. Like I said,
look
it's
at
like
Gandalf.
a through line.
Gandalf is the size of a 6-foot man.
Yes.
So just compare them to Gandalf.
Yeah. I just never wrap my head around it for some reason.
Yeah, there's like Aragorn in Two Towers. I think it's Aragorn. He says something like they would be but children to your eyes.
Right. And they keep talking about like they would go unnoticed, and I'm like, I don't know, man.
Well, and Gandalf,
I'll notice a child. If a child's in my lawn, I'm gonna notice. I'll throw rocks at him. Like, it's just,
get out of here, spray him with the hose. I think
they're
Gandalf,
just funny with that stuff.
Somebody says it. I mean, it's magic, right? These are fantasy creatures. Somebody says earlier, I think it's Gandalf, says that if a hobbit, they're light enough on their feet, like if they don't want to be seen, they won't be seen. Yeah,
they scurry. I think they scurry.
It felt like there was almost a bit of magic to it, where it's like they just have, in D&D terms, I mean, hobbits and halflings make great thieves because they have really high sneak.
Right. But in the terms of this world, it does feel a little like racism, where he's like, hey, Bilbo, you're like a scheming type. You're a scheming sneaker. That's in your blood. Come do this. We need like a sneaky guy. And it's like, you don't know. He might be clumsy. You don't know. Like, just because he's a hobbit. But whatever, it's fine.
It's fantasy, man. Every member of a race is like a monolith of the race,
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantasy or sci-fi.
It's fantasy, and sci-fi is just fantasy in space.
Yeah, they'll deviate. I told you in Star Trek, Picard has one of my favorite deviations, which is a gangster Vulcan. It's a criminal Vulcan, and he's using logic to explain
That's
why
a pretty
he
good
does.
idea.
Yeah, and it's like he's like a scummy gangster, but he's using logic. That was a great idea. I like it when they deviate, and it's like they're still like, they still have those traits, but they're not, one type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I was just, yeah. It is what you say, which is like they're basically just rolling a 20 for sneak, and then it's like, and they magically don't see them. It's like, all right.
There's enough commotion. They're shoving them along. They don't know how many.
It's not impossible.
They don't know how many people they have.
Yeah, again, like if in that commotion, if a child went like prone and like curled up, it's like, yeah, they'd look like a fucking rock, Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
that's it. That's all I have.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Yeah, we said our piece. I'm really enjoying this. It's a really good fan edit. Max Logan Boyer. Once again, B Max Logan, like the letter B Max Logan on Reddit. If you want to watch this fan edit, it is a very good fan edit. It's the most compliment I can say is I'm enjoying this. I'm not exhausted by it. I'm not like, oh my God, there's so much.
No,
Hobbit.
I actually want to. Yeah, like it's.
I forgot that I had to stop watching it, and I was sad I had to.
Exactly, and like I said, I have tried to watch the Hobbit trilogy twice now, and I just can't get through them. I get into the second one, and at a certain point, it's like, man, it's just such a slog.
Yeah. Yeah. So check it out, folks. Thank you, Max. This is through our Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. GAMEFULLY unemployed. We have exclusive podcasts on there like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. We watch movies every Friday night on our Patreon as well. We've never watched them Lords of the Rings, but that would take a minute. Yeah, it'd take a minute, right?
Yeah, we'd have to watch like
the
one a
extended
week.
Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be like 5 hours a week. I mean, we can do that.
We can do that.
I want to do that.
We've watched Titanic before.
Yeah, we have.
We did that.
I guess I could. I've seen the extended enough. It's hard, man, because it's like most, it's one of those movies where I'm like, I just want to quietly watch this.
Right. I just want to sit and exist in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefulunemployed.com. You can find a link to our Teespring store. We have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So check that out.
Yeah. And are they still making the Hobbit Slam at Denny's?
Man, if they are, go get it.
Go get a Hobbit Slam.
Go get a Hobbit Slam.
I bet they could whip one up for you. Like if you demanded go into a Denny's and say, I want a Hobbit Slam, and I'm not leaving until I get one.
Yeah.
They're pushovers.
See what you get. See what winds up in your skillet.
They're not like Waffle House. Like they're pushovers at Denny's. They don't fight back.
Oh, yeah. You can walk out on a check at Denny's. You don't even need to run.
Oh, yeah.
You can just make unbroken eye contact with them.
Yeah, you can just walk in and go, I'm going to work the kitchen for a while. Is that cool?
Yeah. I'm going to make myself some food.
Yeah.
I'm going to make myself a Hobbit Slam.
I'm going to do a Hobbit Slam in your kitchen. Oh, it sounds gross.
It does, Dave. I think we made that joke in a quick fix 100 years ago.
Yeah, probably. It sounds like taking a turd.
It sounds like a hobbit taking a big shit.
Yeah, I'm going to go do a Hobbit Slam.
Or it sounds like the owl pellet you shit out after eating a hobbit.
Yeah, it's pop out a Hobbit Slam.
No, Hobbit Slam, yeah. Anyway.
Hey, listen, our music is produced by Chris Corlew. You can find him on twitter.com as The Corlew or go to shipwreckedsailor.bandcamp.com. Our channel artwork is produced by Michael Vincent Bramley. For more of his work, go to mvbramley.art. Our episode artwork is by Justin Brown, available on Twitter as Justin T. Brown or at artnessbyjustinbrown.com. And finally, additional artwork is by Starlene Hodge. You can find her work at starlenearts.com or on Twitter as StarleneX. Cool. Goodbye.